In this first lesson of How to Excel, we'll look at 3 simple ways that you can use to improve any chart. When it comes to working with charts in Excel, there are 3 easy steps that you can take to improve any chart. The first is to edit. The second is to color appropriately to help tell your story. And the third is to find a descriptive title that helps also to tell your story. One of the things that is important to keep in mind when working with Excel is that just because we can do something doesn't necessarily mean that we should do something. We really want to maximize the information that a chart presents, and by adding in extra clutter, that really detracts from that. So one of the first things that we want to do is to get rid of this fake bevel 3D effect as well as the shadow. One way to do that is if you click on the series, the format ribbon here appears, we go up here, and in the shape effects button there's a preset that is no presets. It basically says get rid of everything. Well, it's got rid of the 3D effect at the very least, it's still left us with the shadow. But why don't we then go to the shape effects shadow and say thank you very much, but no shadow at all, please. One of the other things that's a good rule of thumb, as long as we're working on our series here, is to keep in mind that the width of the bars should be about twice the size as the gap of the bars. So I'm going to select our series again, and then now over here in the format window, I'm going to go ahead and click on the graphing tab here, and we see that there are a few options, namely series overlap, which is at 0, and gap width, which is at 150. We actually want that at 50%, and that will put the gap half the width of the bars. So already we're starting to add lots of information to this. But let's take some things away that aren't necessary. One of the things that's not necessary is this particular legend, because, to be honest, we don't really need that information at this point. Another thing that is a little bit difficult to read that maybe we want to tidy up is we see that the names here, because we have negative values, actually go in and overlap on those bars. So why don't we select that axis, and you see that over here in the Format tab, there have been some changes. And if we go over to this tab again, you see that there are a number of axis options, tick mark options, label options, and number options. Now what we want to do is we actually want to change the label position, which is this right here under the Labels tab. Instead of having it next to the axis, we're going to go ahead and move that to low. So that has now moved those labels down to the bottom. One of the other things that maybe we want to look at is instead of the axis options, the text right now is displaying as kind of half sideways, and that's because we have this as horizontal. I'm going to say rotate all text to 270 degrees. In principle, it's best to keep things horizontal, but with this many different categories, it's just not possible. So in that case, in terms of best practice, we would probably actually switch this from a column chart to a bar chart. And that can be done, by the way, by going from the chart design, and it says change chart type. Right now it's on a column, but if we change it to a bar, we have that. And then instead of having the axis here, let's make sure that we've got the right axis, that we say that's horizontal, and that is much easier to read. So we could go ahead and stick with that, and then maybe, now that we've done that, we want to just reverse the categories in the order, so the negatives are on the bottom and the positives are on the top. It's up to us depending on how we want to work with this data. One of the other things that we want to do is actually declutter this a little bit. We could just get rid of the unnecessary grid marks by selecting them and hitting delete. Also, we need to format this axis a little bit. There are a few things that we need to do. First of all, we definitely want to maximize the space, and right now it goes from minus 30 all the way up to 40, but our lowest value here is minus 18, and our highest one is 30. So why don't we take this in a little bit and say minus 20 to 30. That really gives us the maximum amount of space. One of the other things that we want to do with this is to get rid of these tick marks. So why don't we go ahead and say minor type none, and you see that they've disappeared. And to be honest, I think that we have enough flexibility here that we might even want to get rid of the major ones as well. Indeed, we could just click on this axis and possibly get rid of it. Now, this may not be appropriate in academic writing, but for other uses like social media, it might be okay, especially if we start adding in some direct labels. So one of the ways to do this is let's go ahead and start with the maximum. If you only click once, you see that the entire series is highlighted. And if you right-click, and it still says here Format Data Series and Add Data Labels, plural. But we're not going to add data labels to everything because that's adding unnecessary clutter. So what we want to do is we want to select just one, and so that's basically the equivalent of a double click. We right click that and it now says Add Data Label Only. Okay, so that's added the data label, and if we click on the actual data label itself, now again this is where we need to be careful because right now it still says Format Data Labels, so we click on it twice and we see that that now says Format Data Label Only. We can actually choose where we want it. So the label options, we could say include things like what the series or the category name is, if we wanted to include that sort of thing. In this case, I just want the value itself, and we can also choose where we want it to be. We could put it down here in the center, inside the end, inside the very base, so right there at the very center. If we wanted to put labels maybe on all of them, we would do that. Or outside the end is where it is, and I'm happy enough with it where it is, except for it's a little bit squished. So if you click not on just the chart area, but specifically the plot area, you can drag that to the left just a little bit. That's going to give that a little bit of room to breathe. At the same time, we want the lowest level, so again, we also put a data label here by selecting not just once, but twice. We right-click and say Add Data Label, and that is then appearing outside the end, and actually I think the spacing on that is okay. So we very much edited this down into a more manageable chart. But we still want to tell a story, and one of the things that we can do is to then change the color and use color to help us tell that story. So in this case, for whatever reason, I'm going to select Sao Tome and Principe, and if you again click not just once but twice, we have the option to format the data point now, and we can choose a different fill color. Right now it's on automatic, but if we do a solid fill, we can actually say, let's highlight this one please, and make it a different color. Or, right now everything else in the series appears to be one of these orange colors. We could make it stand out also by using a different hue in that particular set of colors. Also, because we're going to tell the story with that, I'm going to add a data label just to this one as well. And that's already helped us to clean up our story a lot. One of the last things that we can do to improve this chart is to add a very descriptive title. So, for example, we can say Sao Tome and Principe is growing at above the African rate. And then what we often do in the titles is we have a main title and then maybe a subtitle, and we can use the subtitle to explain exactly what this is. In this case, this is going to be average growth rate in 2015 across Africa, for example. I then make that title a little bit more obvious if that's the title and there's a subtitle. And again, just to give that a little bit more space, I'm going to drag that plot area down. And here we have a much improved chart.